Thanks everyone for joining the next session, which is Oracle Apex from idea to application at the speed of light. I hope all of you are healthy and safe. My name is Joel Kallman. I'm a Senior Director of Software Development in the Server Technologies Division at Oracle. And Apex is something that my Senior Vice President, Michael Hitchell, and I started back in 1999, and we've been leading the development and product management of it since that time. For any questions that you may have, I encourage you to ask them in the Q&A, and I'll save roughly 10 minutes at the end to discuss those, okay? So Apex is far and away the industry's most used enterprise low-code platform, a platform to develop low-code applications. There are more than 50,000 customers, more than 500,000 developers, and this is growing seemingly every day. Also, I think it is one of the most passionate and helpful communities, I would say, in the industry, not just at Oracle. Apex is all about productivity and being able to deliver applications with higher quality for far less cost and faster. And we believe building like-for-like applications, commonly data-driven applications used in a business setting, that using the framework of Apex, we believe it is 20 times faster to build the same application with more than 100 times less code if you wrote this with lovingly handcrafted JavaScript code, for example. And we're in the process of actually vetting this, having an independent third party actually vet this claim. And personally, I believe these numbers are low. I'm a firm believer that there is a cost associated with every line of code you write in every application. And I don't care if you're using C# or JavaScript or XML or JSON or Go or Rust, doesn't matter. There's a cost associated with the development of each line of code, the review of that line of code, the security, the maintenance of that line of code, and on and on and on. And the less code there is, by definition, the less cost, the less technical debt, and the quicker that you'll be able to deliver applications. Whether you believe in low code or not, industry analysts believe that there is a huge market for low-code application development tools and platforms. And industry analyst Gartner predicts that by 2024, far more than half of all application development activity will be done with low-code tools and platforms. And in an era of coronavirus and the need for immediate applications, we've seen the rise of low-code development platforms. So what's Apex? Apex is the low-code application development framework that's a part of every Oracle database. It is designed to enable someone to easily and quickly build applications that look great on a desktop, on a smartphone, or on a tablet without requiring specific knowledge of how to do that. You don't have to be a full-stack developer to build applications for each of these devices. Apex is extraordinarily good at building applications to help you maintain data. So if you have a common business process that is very much data-driven and you want to build a form and a report to maintain this data, it's trivial to do in Apex. It's also exceedingly simple to create applications that provide beautiful visualizations against your data. And lastly, with Apex, if you know a little bit of SQL, you can flourish in this development environment. So you do not need to be a wizard when it comes to CSS or HTML or JavaScript. If you know SQL, you can flourish in this environment. Earlier, Juan talked about data-driven applications and how Apex is ideal for data-driven applications. It has deep integration of the database and reduces cost and complexity. But also beyond just being data-driven, I personally believe the database is this wonderfully rich application development platform. There is a wealth of functionality natively in the database to help build applications, regardless of platform. And a great example of this is something called Oracle Spatial. And for years, this has been a for-cost option of the Oracle database. And in the past year, the licensing has changed so that this is now available in every database at no additional license cost, and including on the cloud. And what's great is we had a webinar, I would say about a month ago, with the Oracle Spatial product development team, and they had developed functionality using Oracle Spatial to assist with very relevant topic, contact tracing. And what's great is using this very powerful functionality in the Oracle database, they developed APIs which are very easy to understand, very easy to interface with. And using Apex, they were able to put a very rich and compelling UI on top of this. And if you wish to look at this later, scan the QR code and you can see the replay of this office hours. But this is just a great example of how there's this wealth of application development functionality in the Oracle database, and you're able to access it, visualize it, and essentially display it with a beautiful UI in Apex. The great thing about Apex is it is available everywhere. Wherever there's an Oracle database, you can build and run and deploy low-code applications. For those who don't know, there are free versions of the Oracle database. So for example, on premises, there's something called Express Edition or XE, which you can run and deploy and build applications 100% free on premises. There's also something called the free Oracle Cloud, or the Oracle Cloud free tier. And that's what I'll be demonstrating today. And with this, you can get up to 2 free Oracle Autonomous Databases free forever. With Apex, there are no limits on the number of developers or end users or apps, and it is extraordinarily efficient. So you would look at this and you would think, well, I'm going to run my application and my business logic in the database, and that sounds heavy. But trust me when I say that I believe this is one of the most efficient application execution engines on the planet. I like to present this slide of a partner of ours. This is Explorer UK. And their tagline is, "We develop cloud-ready applications." And it's important to note that any Apex application that you build on premises looks and runs exactly on the cloud, because for essentially the genesis of Apex, it has been browser-based hosted multi-tenant. And this translates beautifully to the cloud. So if you're using Oracle database on premises and you have Apex already for free, right, part of your database license, the Apex applications that you build today, the environment is virtually identical on the Oracle cloud and even other clouds. So let's give a quick demonstration, and I'm actually going to provide 2 demonstrations here. So one of the most common business problems is people using spreadsheets as multi-user databases. And forgive me for saying this, I even find this the case in Oracle sometimes, where people will send a spreadsheet as an email attachment. They'll send it to 10 or 15 people, and you'll get instructions, fill in your these particular rows and send them back. And I see this time and time again in every enterprise I encounter. And there are 1,000 things wrong with this, right? There's no security, there's no auditing, there's no record of who accessed this information. The quality of information is very low. What's the single point of truth? Don't know. Who's got the latest spreadsheet attachment, right? And this is a very common scenario to take a spreadsheet, as you're looking at here, rows of data, and I want to put this in an Oracle database. In the case of this demo, I'll put it in Oracle Autonomous Database and easily create a beautiful Apex UI on top of that. Okay, so let's get going. So here I am in my always free Oracle Autonomous Database. I'm running Apex, and what I'm going to do is I want to create a new application. So I'm going to create a new app, and this could be against existing tables that I have, but in my case, I'm going to do this from a file. So this could be comma-separated values, native Excel, JSON, doesn't matter. So I'm going to take this Excel spreadsheet that I showed, and where did this go? I'm going to drag and drop this spreadsheet. And this is a native XLSX file. And what we'll do is parse this data. And I'm going to give my table a name. And I'm going to say load the data. So now behind the scenes, we're creating an ordinary Oracle table. And we're taking these rows and inserting these, in this case, just a mere 73 rows. So now this table's live. And what I wish to do is create an application on top of this. So I can see that I'm now in the Create Application Wizard of Apex. I can see that it's pre-populated some pages here for me. I'm going to check this box and I'm going to go. And what's distinct about Apex is it's not a code generator. So even though I see my wizard here creating my application, in fact, it's a metadata-driven execution engine. It's not a code generator. So now, effectively with no code, I have a 28-page application, and I'm going to run it. So let me log into my application. And here we are. So I have a number of pages. I have a built-in dashboard because we're in the database. We know everything about your data. We know the cardinality, the data distribution, what would be good columns to use in a dashboard. You can customize these, but we took our best guess. I also have a form and a report. So I can easily edit data here. Obviously, based upon the data type, we'll render this appropriately. This component we're looking at here called an interactive report, it lets me do easy tasks as an end user. So let's say the display of this, the developer just presented an interactive report on a table or a query, and now I, the end user, can customize this as I like. So for example, let's say I wish to group my data by project. I don't want to see this end date column, and perhaps I want to sort this by start date. Well, now every custom view that I create, I can also save this. And you can have 1,000 different users with 1,000 different views of the data. The job for the developer, it's trivial, but this puts the power in the hands of the end users to be able to customize the view of the data. So the next time I come access this report, I see it as the developer intended, and I can have effectively an unlimited number of views of that data. I can even come full circle here. I can download this back into CSV and present this in a spreadsheet. So we have this report here. Also present in my application is something called a faceted search. So rather than this interactive report, which effectively is like a mini report builder, everybody knows how to use a faceted search because you see this very commonly on commercial websites from eBay to Amazon to Zappos. So I'm able to drill down and I can see these updated in real time, the view of my filtered results on the right-hand side. In the next version of Apex, we're introducing charts to faceted search, and I think this will really complete faceted search because if I have billions of rows and I filter this down to, let's say, 100,000 rows, I would want some visualization of the chart. So this is live today, though, and this is very fast, and it's really, when you bring this ease of use of data visualization and data filtering to business applications, it's really a novel feature. So back in my application, the last thing I want to show is I've done nothing special here, and I've created a completely responsive application. So everything that I've done right now, it renders appropriately on a smartphone, on a tablet, and I didn't write a single line of code to achieve this. And it's very easy to customize the UI to match your corporate look and feel. Okay, so this is from idea to application at the speed of light. But what if your idea is something you wrote on the back of a napkin? What if you have an idea and not necessarily a spreadsheet? Well, I want to show you something else in Apex. So in Apex, there's something called SQL Workshop, and this enables me to browse my database objects, create new database objects. Let's say I had an idea for a table. What I can do is run a wizard, and I can say, okay, I want to manage to-dos and assignees, for example, right? So I want to create a table called to-dos, and let's say these have a name, and then a due date. Right, I'm able to step through this wizard and create these tables, but then I would also have to identify the relationships between tables, a foreign key relationship or some other type of referential integrity constraint. But what we have in Apex is something called Quick SQL. And with Quick SQL, using effectively an indentation, a shorthand syntax, I'm able to convey data relationships simply by indentation of this. So for example, let's say I wish to create tables that track assignees, and they have a full name, and they have an email, and I don't care, let's say even a phone number, okay? And for each assignee, I also want to track to-dos, and my to-dos might have a name, and I mentioned that they have a due date, right? And we'll see that as I type in this shorthand syntax, I get my DDL generated for the assignees, for the to-dos, and also the referential integrity constraint, and even an index on that. So now, if I have this great idea, I could even suggest that I wish to generate some data. It's easier for me to look at my application if I have generated data. So perhaps let me generate 50 of these. And I'm able to do extremely rapid data model development and build an application on top of this. And notice that with just this short amount of code, I have hundreds of lines of SQL that I'm ready to run. So I'm going to cheat here a little bit, and I have this quick SQL that I want to use, which effectively follows exactly what I was doing before. It's I've added a couple check constraints that I can specify in line here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the SQL script, and I'm going to run it. Okay? So I'm going to review and run my SQL script. I expect the first two drop table statements to fail expectedly because the tables don't exist, but everything else should work just great. I've run my script, and now I can create an application on this. So I'm going to go back to my Create Application Wizard. And this is a much simpler implementation here. I'll call this To-Dos. And it has a simple interactive report and form like you've seen before. But I'm going to augment this with a master detail. So I'm going to find my master detail here, and I'll just call this MD for now. I'll look up the table that I had. In this case, the master is assignees. We have a full name and an email, and I can have multiple detail tables underneath this. So I'm going to add my page. I hit Create Application. And now I'm going to run it. So I'm going to run my application, and here I can see here's the form and report on assignees with the generated data. Here are the to-dos, but really I want to see this represented as a master detail. And so now I have a completely editable interface. I can edit the master here if I wish. I don't know why my trackpad went. Or I can even edit and add a new to-do. Again, effectively in this case with no code. So let's look at some examples of Apex in the real world and common use cases for it. So as I've shown, Apex is commonly used for spreadsheet replacement. And very often when people use spreadsheets as multi-user databases, You now put this in an autonomous database, and instead of sending an email attachment, you provide a URL to people for them to update and view data. And what happens usually is you now open up this data to so many greater possibilities. You can add visualizations, you can audit who edited what when. You can develop a very rich application in a short amount of time, and it is 100 times more powerful than a mere spreadsheet. Apex is commonly used for opportunistic applications. And for those who don't know, an opportunistic application is one with loose requirements and immediate need. And in an era of a global pandemic, we've seen this requirement for opportunistic apps. It's omnipresent on the globe. People need an application to manage hospital beds, and no effective way to do it other than a spreadsheet. And so we've seen this Apex time and time again used for this type of problem solving. There's also Apex is commonly used for Oracle Forms replacement or even augmentation. And I personally believe that Apex is one of the most ideal platforms for existing Oracle Forms developers because they are very fluent in SQL and PL SQL. They have a huge investment in back-end data modeling and business logic in the database, and it's very easy for them to adapt to Apex and put a very elegant UI on that existing business logic and data. And like I said before, if you know a little bit of SQL, you can flourish in Apex. You do not need to be a wizard with CSS, HTML, or even JavaScript. So some real world customer examples in Neathport Talbot Council in Neath, which is in Wales. They actually have an internet facing application for their citizens to report issues they find throughout their geographic area, whether it be trash in the street or pothole. And they have an Apex application on the front end. Notice that it's mobile friendly and in Welsh for their citizens to report issues. And then this ultimately gets recorded in an Oracle database. And on the back end, they also use Apex applications to manage the triage and resolution of these same issues. Another customer in Slovenia, Sodo, they are the electricity distribution system operator, and they are a longtime Oracle Forms customer, and they have effectively rewritten and put a new UI on their back office systems, all done in Apex, and done beautifully, I might add. Another customer in Abu Dhabi, this is the Vocational Education and Training Center, and they used to manage course registrations via a spreadsheet. And they simply replaced this with an online registration form and then processing of that. And they've processed more than 14,000 registrations through their Apex application. Imagine managing this with spreadsheets in the prior life. And then sometimes customer successes just happen to come to us. On Twitter, this is Professor Michelle Hardwick from Salt Lake Community College. And she put on Twitter how her team rolled out a new faculty dashboard to more than 3,000 faculty at Salt Lake Community College. And what's great about this is this just conveys the power of what one can do, not only with Apex, but with the underlying database and the analytics that they're able to capitalize on. So we can see along the bottom here, they wanted to do some analysis of how closely did homework course grades correlate to the final end of term grade. And using SQL in the database, you can do this very quickly and very easily, and with less code. Back in March of this year, our team was engaged with effectively 1,000 other Oracle employees to build something called the COVID-19 Therapeutic Learning System. And this was not a clinical trial system, but a system designed to gather information from patients who are being treated for coronavirus and to monitor their symptoms. And ultimately, this is used by both doctors and patients. Doctors will come and enter their patients into the system. And a patient will get an email every day that says, how are you doing today versus yesterday, and are you experiencing any new symptoms? And the whole purpose of this was to help those in the U.S. government make better informed decisions about treatments. And the great thing about this is this application, really, it is a set of applications, 7 applications of more than 200 pages. The original prototype was done in 3 days, and it was rolled out live on the Oracle Cloud in, I think it was 12 days total. I don't think any other company or any other technology could have achieved this in such a short amount of time. And it's still live today. So if you go to covid19.oracle.com, you'll see the registration page for this application. And I gave an interview to an industry analyst, Tony Baer, and I thought he did a superb write-up of this on ZDNet. But beyond just Oracle assisting with the global pandemic, the Apex community has completely stepped up and delivered a lot of these opportunistic solutions using Apex. And if you go to the community site, apex.world, you'll see a host of applications that our community has created around the globe to assist with management and distribution of masks, of delivery of food for infirmed people, and on. It's really just an amazing community who they've selflessly given of their time and talent to help others, and they just so happen to use Apex to do this. I could not be more proud of them. So in summary, just a few quick wins here. In November of 2019, Oracle was named a November 2019 Gartner Peer Insights Customer Choice distinction for enterprise low-code application platforms for Oracle Apex. And this is something that was awarded by our customers who gave reviews of Oracle Apex, and I encourage you to review these vetted reviews of Apex by real customers. Also, earlier this year, G2 Crowd labeled Apex one of the best low-code development platforms. And just, I would say, in the past couple months, another analyst, Constellation, listed Apex in the short list of enterprise low-code tools and platforms. So Apex, in summary, is the industry-leading low-code application development platform. I believe it is extraordinarily easy to learn and get started. And the one thing that I failed to mention, but I'll mention now, is it doesn't necessarily require a full-stack developer to get started. There are those who might consider themselves citizen developers or power users to be able to contribute applications to an enterprise. Apex is very much SQL and REST friendly. So the optimal use case is Apex adjacent to your data. But if your data is remote, let's say via an arbitrary REST endpoint, you can declaratively build Apex applications, forms, charts, interactive grids on remote data just as easily as you can on local data. Apex is included free with all Oracle databases, not only the free Oracle databases, but if you're using Oracle database on premises today, you are licensed and supported for Apex. And you can also use Apex on every database cloud service, Exadata cloud service, database as a service on Oracle Cloud, and obviously my favorite, Oracle Autonomous Database. There are a huge number of success stories for Apex across all industries, big and small. And like I mentioned before, we have a very passionate community of more than 500,000 developers worldwide. If you desire any more information about Oracle Apex or where to get started or learning materials or success stories or Apex for Forms developers, it is all on apex.oracle.com. So if you go to apex.oracle.com, hopefully we've answered your question. And speaking of questions, we have, I have 10 minutes for questions, so I'll go down the list here. Joel, awesome shirt. Can we purchase it? This is from Anonymous. Don't know. Bo English on our team kindly was the one who procured these. I don't think you can purchase them today, but how about if you contact me on Twitter and I'll find out if there's a good way that we can get you a shirt, okay? Next one from Anonymous attendee, is Apex database version dependent? Is it compatible with previous versions of the database, 9i, 10g, etc.? Great question. When we release a version of Apex, there is a minimum database version that is supported with it. And the latest version available today, Apex, if you go to apex.oracle.com/download, you'll see that you can download the latest version, Apex 20.1. And the minimum database version for this is 11.204 and higher. Database version 11.204 and higher. So 9i, 10g, it won't work there. And then just to give you a bit of a tip, in the fall, when we release Apex 20.2, the minimum database version is going to be, I believe, Oracle Database 12.1. Okay. Anonymous asked, is there an API that can read and write data from and to Google Sheets? Don't know. All I can say is if there is a REST API that permits you to read and write from Google Sheets, then you could build an Apex application that could interface to that. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I would be really surprised if there was not a REST API for Google Sheets. Okay. On backup and recovery of database, does it include the Apex applications and metadata? Also from Anonymous. Brilliant question. The answer is 1,000% yes. So your application definitions are maintained in the Oracle database. And so I view Apex as one of the only platforms on the planet that could survive an outage and your end users would never know. Because even at runtime, we maintain session state and database tables, right, in the catalog of Apex. So I often say you can have someone start a multi-step wizard. Let's say they enter their first name, they hit next. They enter the last name, they hit next, and they go to lunch. And when they're out to lunch, let's say the database crashes for whatever reason, or the service is unavailable. The administrators restore the database, bring it back up and running, and assuming that there wasn't, that application didn't time out because, for security reasons, this person could come back from lunch and pick up exactly where they left off. So another important point about that is not only is your database backed up, but you also inherit the disaster recovery abilities of the database. So let's say, and this is proven in the Oracle database, and we even proved it as part of that therapeutic learning system. We tested disaster recovery from one region to another, and guess what? It worked on the first try. And so it's very difficult to achieve DR with a lot of middle tier logic, and with Apex, it's built into the database. So fantastic question. Next one from anonymous attendee, can I upload fixed length data file into the table and generate reports using Apex? Good question. I know that we use delimited, sorry, I was looking at somebody sending me something here. We use a delimited format, whether it be JSON or CSV. But I will say that you can always, we have a built-in data parser PL SQL package called Apex Exec Data Parser. And you can effectively control how you parse the incoming data. So I think we don't permit fixed width today, but if I were you, I would upload it and then I would use either PL SQL or I would use this data parser to go through the data. Great one. Someone says, so Apex is not a replacement for Tableau or Power BI, correct? I don't think so. Listen, I think Tableau is a great tool, but you can also build magnificent visualizations with Apex out of the box. If you go to apex.oracle.com/charts, you'll see all the visualizations you can get out of Apex. And what's different about this is rather than just I build a chart and I have a viewer, is I can embed a chart anywhere in my application. So just like you saw me use a master detail form that I built in my application, I could easily add another page that's embedded in my application that is a chart. And the great thing about Apex in this case is the only thing I need to specify for my chart is my SQL query. Dennis says, when you talk about auditing, is that auditing of the data or the application code and design? My specific case, I was talking about auditing of the data. So there's a facility in Apex that lets you generate audit columns and will automatically generate the triggers to populate those audit columns. So in this case, I was talking about auditing of the data itself, but because Apex is in the database, you also get built-in auditing and tracking of who is changing what in your application. So what page was last modified by whom. Justin asked, is there an official Apex component for drag and drop file upload? Great question, Justin. Not today, but the one thing we're working on for the next version of Apex 20.2 is a drop zone component for exactly that. Anonymous asked, any ideas for building an Apex application from a spreadsheet that includes multiple worksheets? Great question. Actually, in our Create Application Wizard, you would have the option, when I did Create from File, and also in the Data Upload in SQL Workshop, you would have the option to specify your sheet that you wanted to upload, for example. So if I were you, I would go through the utilities in SQL Workshop, upload these to tables, and then just create a new application on my existing tables. Let's see. Somebody asked, can you delegate access to data based on the user accessing the application? User A can only access data that relates to user A and not user B. Also a great question. There's a couple ways to do this. You could build it in the Apex application. So you could add a where clause to your report, for example, and constrain it by the name of the logged in user. So you could say where owner equal : app user. That's who's logged in. While that works, there's a downside of that, and that is you're building the security in your application. And so now let's say somebody comes along with Tableau or .NET or their favorite tool, and you need to build that same security. So just understand there are native facilities in the Oracle database that let you restrict that based upon user as well. There's things called real application security, as well as virtual private database. I'm going to take one more, and then I think I'm going to have to quit. Fantastic questions, by the way. Alex asked, is it able to generate API and REST endpoints as well? 1,000% absolutely. So the one thing I didn't show, but in SQL Workshop, there is native integration with ORDS, Oracle REST Data Services, the RESTful services of ORDS. And you can easily, with one click, REST enable a table, and you will get all the methods to put, post, get, and delete against that table. But you can also create custom REST endpoints based upon a SQL query that returns a JSON, that returns a binary object. It's all there out of the box. The great thing about this as well is the RESTful services that you create within Apex, they're identical, so you could manipulate them with SQL Developer Web or the PL SQL API. Fantastic questions. Wow, this is amazing. So up next are two sessions. One is from Josh Spiegel, finally a low latency scalable JSON document store with real-time analytics. And there's another session from my buddy Chris Saxon called 21st Century SQL. I really appreciate everyone attending today. I hope this was worthwhile, and I hope you stay healthy and safe. Thank you.